Okay, in this segment we're going to develop an application from scratch that starts to do something almost interesting. And we're going to focus on events and the activities, and we'll do a little bit of work with the view and creating a simple user interface. So this segment is still about getting started, seeing how all of the pieces come together. So we're going to make an application that was inspired by one of the dogs. It's completely useless. It's called I can go over here, I can go over there, I can go over here, I can go over there. That's what this dog does all the time. So we need two activities, each with a button and an event handler to hear these button clicks. So when you're making an application, you should have some idea of where you're going, and you should have a sketch of what the application looks like and a description of what it's going to do. In this case, it's very simple. It fits all on this slide. So there are two activities. The first one, when the application starts, it's going to be an activity that is over here. And the thing that you can do, the activity that you can do from over here, is go over there. And that will use an intent to get us to the other activity where you have a button that says go over here. So it starts to be a little bit confusing because when you are someplace you can't go over here, but that's okay. It's not too complicated. You can get your brain around this. So there it is then, two activities. That means two user interface screens with buttons on them, and one says go over there and one says go over here. So here are the topics to look for. So we're going to make an activity of our own. The activities up till now, the main activity gets created for you when you make the Hello World kind of application. And when you create an activity, we have to remember that each activity has to be in the manifest. This is something that I always forget, and I'll probably forget it again. So we're going to create a second view, and so this is from scratch. It isn't created for us. And an intent. An intent is how we get from one activity to the other. So this one is very, very simple. There are other purposes of having an intent, but an intent is kind of like something that you go and do. And one of the simplest things is to go and get into the other activity. We'll play a little bit with the user interface building, not in a serious way. We're not in the segments where we are specifically working on user interface, and we will create some new resources. So a string resource and a color resource are probably more than one of each of those. So we'll create an event handler for the buttons, and there are two ways of doing that, the old harder way and the new easy way. And then we will call, this is the other thing that's new, we'll call on the intent to switch from one activity to the other activity. So we'll start right from the beginning, right from scratch, as if we had nothing to start with, and everyone will be able to follow along step by step. Let's go do it. So let's start right from the beginning, a new project, and we're going to pick Android project. And I'm going to call it Here and There. I'm going to pick that it's a 2.2 application. There's some new stuff, and if you go back to the old ones, then you have to go back to the older way of doing things. So I'm picking, as of today, the most popularly used version is 2.2, which is SDK version 8. So I'm going to, each time I do one of these, I try something different to see what kind of trouble I'm in. So the application name, how about Here and There? And the package name, okay, the package name, com.valenciaprogrammers.here-there. So package names are not supposed to have any capital letters, and we are going to create an activity, and the main activity will be called the Here activity. And let's just create that. There is already a file or directory named here or there in the selected location. Yeah, I was cheating. This is going to be here or there, take 2. Is everybody happy with that one? Okay, we can just click finish there and go in and make sure that we remember where stuff is. There's the Android 2.2, the library that we're going to use. So here's our source folder and the package here, there, and we have the here activity. This is kind of like the hello world. The layout, the main layout for the application, the default one it creates is this hello world, and it names the activity. And under values, we have some resources that are created for us already. So in this XML file, we have a string called hello world activity, and we have a string called here and there, which can be used as it's the app name. Okay, so this is where we kind of left off the last time. We have an application that that runs on the emulator, and it doesn't do anything interesting. So even though it's fairly painful and it takes a long time, you should run your application periodically so that you know when there's a mistake, how far back you have to go. And the biggest mistake people make, the biggest mistake I make when running these things, is I don't wait long enough. So make sure that you're looking down here, that the activity is actually loaded on the emulator and it's running, because it takes what seems like forever to achieve. So we have our here there project is working, but it doesn't do anything interesting. So let's go into the main XML to start with. What did I just do? Oh, I moved main into values. That was bad. Okay. So this layout is going to be different for our application. And we're not going to have a text view at all. We're going to replace this with a button. And our button is going to have some characteristics. I like to copy and paste. Instead of fill parent here, we're going to write wrap content. For the width and the height. And this button needs to have an ID. This plus sign means it's a new one. I'm going to call it the here button. And we're going to use that identifier in the Java code. And I want some text on that button. And on the button, I'm going to say, go over there. Okay. Save that. And we don't have what I expected. Why not? Well, I'm not sure why the graphical layout thing is still showing the old way of looking at that layout, and this is one of the problems. The graphical layout thing where you supposedly can drag and drop buttons and make an interface, you really can't. It's really quite frustrating. So I'm gonna add something to the linear layout and see if maybe we can convince it to talk to us. But I'm going to set the background to a different color. So this assumes that we have a resource, a color resource called red, and we don't. So it doesn't compile. So I'm going to go down here into values, and I'm going to add a file called colors.xml, and this will be more resources for our application. And I think I can use the helpful wizards here. If we add a color and call it red. No, what's going on there? Okay, so I had to just double click on that, and I'm going to call it red, and its value is going to be red, green, blue. Will that work? Not quite. I left out that. That should work. Okay, so we have a resource called red, but this isn't a valid XML file. This always drives me crazy that they could have done this for me. But I'm just going to copy this out of the strings XML. And you cannot have a blank line as the first line of an XML file. How many times have we tripped over that? Okay, a blank line cannot be the first line of an XML file. Okay, now we have a resource called red, and if we go back to this, our main XML, our layout, we should have it compiling now, and perhaps we've convinced the graphical layout manager to help us. No, not yet. So it seems to be compiling, but it's not showing us what we want. When you get in funny states like this in Eclipse, you're changing lots of different files, and it's trying to dynamically compile and keep everything up to date. If you go under Project and say Clean, sometimes this helps. And you can clean specific projects if you want to. And it still is not convinced that that is different than it used to be. Well, let's run it and see what happens. And we have this very not nice looking user interface where we have a button that doesn't do anything, but it will go over there. So this is an example now of when these things are not keeping up with what's going on in the XML file. So you do get some weird behaviors like that, and you have to just kind of be patient while you're here. Okay. While we're in here and we kind of know what's going on, I'm going to add another color resource. let's say that blue looks like this. There's red, green, blue. Is that too blue? I don't want to blind anyone with how blue that is. Okay. So now we have a button that has go over there on it, and I'm going to add one more thing. I want this to be doing it the convenient way, believe it or not. I'm going to add an on-click property to this button and say when someone clicks on it, I want to execute this button, the here button handler. So this is the name of a method that I want to execute when the user clicks on the here button. And we don't have that method yet, but in the here activity, which is using that layout, I'm going to add that method. Whoops, I thought I had put it on the clipboard. The here button handler, and it's going to be a public void and it takes a view, and don't gasp, it throws exception, and for now it won't do anything. Okay, so here's a problem. We've used the name of a class which has not been imported, and if you hover over it, it's a lot easier to just pick on this one, import that package, or actually that class, so that we don't have to dig around and figure out where it is. Okay, so what do we have going on now? We have a button that is associated with a method that will be executed. So in our activity, this is the main activity, or what we're calling the here activity, we have a button handler method, and whatever we put in here is what will happen when the user clicks on that button. So far so good? Okay, so next what I want us to do is to add another activity, and it'll be called the there activity. So let's go into this package and say new class, and the name of this class will be there, and it's going to inherit from let's see, I wonder if that's correct. Yep, it was. Okay. So we have another class that inherits from activity, and this is the one that will be over there. And let's see, what do we need to do next? We need to have a view that corresponds with it. So in layout, we're going to need another XML file, the layout for over there. So let's say, let's make a new file in layout, and I'm going to call it there.xml. Will that work for us without getting too complicated, too confusing? Okay, so there.java is the activity, and there XML is the layout for that activity. Well, let's start out by cheating. Let's take the main XML and use it for there, and let's see, what do we want to do? Let's change the color so that it's different from the other one. Let's make this one the blue one, and that will be different. It will be the there button, and I'm going to say go to here. So if we're over there, we're going to go to here. And a method called the there button handler, and see what happens. Okay, that seems to compile. See if the graphical layout is helping us this time, and it is. I don't know why it wasn't before, but that is the layout there XML. So let's go back to the activity and see what we have to do in here. Well, here's a trick. When you're implementing a class that extends another class, a lot of times the methods that you're inheriting, they can have very complicated signatures, and you'd have to go and look them up. So I want to, in source, let's say override or implement the methods that we're inheriting. And so here are the methods in the activity class that we're inheriting, and I want to implement the onCreate method, and it takes a bundle. Okay, that might look a little bit strange. You'll get used to it. So what do we need to do when this activity is created? We're going to set the content view to the layout that we just created, and it's called there XML. But that's not how we get it. We get it by saying r.layout.there. I think so. Okay, so this is going and getting the layout that we created in there XML. So where does this R thing come from, and how does it know about something that we just created? Okay, dig down in here a little bit. This folder called gen is code that's generated for you, and you don't change it. So there's a class called R.java. If we open that, look at all of the stuff that we've been creating using the XML has been translated into these static final classes inside of the class R, and one of them is called there, and it's in the class layout. So you can dig around and look at what's going on in the R class, the resources class, but you shouldn't really need to. You just kind of understand that it's going in there, and that means that you can use it. So for this example, we said r.layout.there, and a lowercase l here breaks the Java naming convention, but I'll get over it. Okay, so what have we achieved here? We've made an activity, and we've said when this activity gets created, meaning when someone makes an instance of it, then we're going to set its view to this layout that we created in XML in there. So we're getting there, folks. We have here's the here layout, which still doesn't look right, and we don't know why. Maybe someone will see something that I'm doing wrong. So we've got the here activity, and we've got the here button handler, and we've got the there activity. Oh, we need the there button handler. That one's easy. Let's put it in first, because we said we would have a method called there button handler in the there activity. And it takes a view, and I don't know if does it really have to throws exception? Let me try this and see if it will compile without it. I really don't like putting in throws exception. What was I going to do here? Hover over this and import it so it will compile. We do not need that throws exception. That's good. That's good. That has been bothering me. Okay, good. So we've set up the two activities, and they're not associated with each other yet. So each one has a view that gets displayed when it's created. And each one has a button with a button handler. So the next thing that we need to do is to implement the code that goes in here. When someone clicks on the button, when you're here, what do you do? And when someone clicks on the button when you're there, what do you do? Well, I want to do the easy one first. Did you know if you typed SYSO control space, it would do a system out print line for you? So this is a button event handler. So this one is simple, and we're breaking the rules a little bit, but this activity there, I just want it to go away. So I'm going to kill the activity. This is the end of its very short life cycle. It gets created, and if someone says go back over there, then this activity goes away. But don't worry. It will get created again. A new instance of this class will get created when someone who is in the other activity clicks on the button, go over there. Okay, so that's one thing you can do in an activity. If you're done with it, you can get rid of it. So in the here activity, if someone clicks on the here button, which says go over there, we're going to make something called an intent. Okay, so let's declare one, an intent and it doesn't seem to know what that is, so let's hover over it and say import one, and we're going to say new intent trouble typing today. Okay, so we're going from this, that's the object that is the originator, and we're going to say over there there dot class, which is what's the easiest way of saying this? That's the thing that we're going to make. And this particular intent is a very simple one, and it has the job of getting us from this activity to the other activity. So intents are kind of like the verbs in the application, and the activities, although it sounds like a verb, those are like the nouns. So here's the presentation of what the user can do, and then the intent is how we move around and get stuff done. That's a good way of putting it. The intent is how we get stuff done. So what we're going to do is, using this intent object, one of the things we can do is start an activity. And we're going to start the activity that's associated with the intent we just created. So if someone clicks on the Here button, we create an intent, and then we say, let's start the activity that will take us over there. And I wonder if this will just work. Should I just try and run it and see if it will work? Okay, let's do it. Okay, so here's the big test. If you're looking in the console window, if you get this, that it has installed your APK and it's starting it, then you should see something happen. So if I click on go over there, oh, and I told you right from the beginning that I would make this mistake. And every time I see this happen, I know exactly what mistake that I've made. So, does anyone remember what I said? Well, we'll probably forget to do that. In the manifest, which is a manifest is kind of the list of what this application has. We let's just look at the XML. Every filter, sorry, I'm looking at it. Every activity has to have an entry in the manifest. So the there activity, which we just tried to go to, is not here. Let's try and make one. Whoops. Okay, now we need something else. Okay, I'm going to steal this line from here. Okay, I think that that's really all we have to do. And if you're saying, well, I only partly understand this, that's okay. That's just where we are. We have to ease into a whole bunch of things all at the same time. So I'm going to try and run this again and see if it just works. And assuming that it does, then we'll dig in a little bit and explore just a little bit more for this video. Okay, so when you get that you're starting the intent, okay, please work this time. Go over there. Yay! Now we're over there. We can go here. Now we're over there. Okay, so this might seem pretty simple to you, but we've achieved something that is a big chunk of Android programming. And it's the hard part about learning this is that you get a whole pile of stuff thrown at you right at the very beginning. So if this was overwhelming, that's okay. Do it again. Build this application 3 or 4 times. I've probably done it 15 times. And if I go away for a week and come back to it, then I have to remember all of this stuff again, but it's a little bit faster each time. Okay, let's dig in a little bit and have a look at a few more things that you can do in here. Well, let's look at just a few more little things before we leave this one. We broke one of the rules when we hard-coded a string into this layout file. So when I said what I want to go on the button is go to here, I really should have made a string resource and put it in strings XML and then referred back to that string. Well, that's really kind of time consuming and you'd like to skip ugly things like that. So highlight this and say refactor Android extract Android string, and it will extract it to it will give it a name and it will put it in the strings XML file for you. So just say OK, and now we have conformed to the rules. This is a reference to the resource in the string resource called go to here, the same as this is a reference to the color resource blue. And if we look in strings XML now, oh, I just moved it, didn't I? Wow, that's a bad thing. Okay. It moves files from folder to folder very easily. Wow, that's a big risk. Okay. So now we have in the strings XML, we have the go to here string. And if we want to localize the application so that if we're selling it all over the world, we can, we don't have to go through the code and change the strings. We can localize using the string resources. But sometimes that works for me and sometimes it doesn't. I'm still having trouble with this main XML. The graphic layout doesn't match this. I'm too lazy to type it all over again. I'm not seeing anything wrong with it, and when I say refactor, it gives me some very annoying message that says it doesn't accept a string reference, which, okay, maybe somebody watching would see what I'm doing wrong, but I just don't see that yet. And this happens from time to time in Android, and I just kind of don't get frustrated and move on. Okay, so keeping your strings in the strings resource is considered kind of important. Is there anything else that we need to look at while we're in here? We haven't actually run the debugger yet. If you are if you're worried about what's going on and when, in the usual way, set a breakpoint in Eclipse, double click out here in the margin, and then debug. Okay, debug here and there, take 2. Okay, so the execution looks the same. Now we have an uncaught exception. I don't know why. Sometimes in those DOS windows that pop up and flash by, there will be an exception that you don't get time to read. My machine is kind of bogged down, so we got to look at that one just for a second. It's another one that's just a little bit kind of a mystery to me. Even the instructor that I had when I was learning this stuff had a lot of the same quirky little problems, and he very bravely as an instructor just said, well, just keep going, just move on. So we will. So what I've done now is I've set a breakpoint in the source code, and I've said debug this Android application, and it will hit that breakpoint. It takes even longer. But don't be reluctant to run the debugger. It's a very good debugger. Remember, we have it will switch to the debug perspective, and it will tell you stuff about what's going on. So we've hit the breakpoint at the set content view, and we have the emulator running out here. So if we just say continue, resume, in the emulator, oh, this will be interesting. We'll probably hit that breakpoint again immediately, will we? No, because the here activity is only created once. So when we go over there and go back to here, the here activity was only created once, but the there activity is being created over and over because we actually stopped it. We could hit this breakpoint over and over. Let's see if that's working. Right. Okay. And you can step through your Java code. So let's step over the creation of that intent and then start the activity. Well, we can't step in there because we don't have the source code loaded. Oh, did I click on start instead of resume? I think I did. Well, oops. Okay, well, that's okay. Once we get some more interesting code for stepping through and see that it's doing what you want it to do, then debugging works pretty much the same way in Android as it does in plain old Java applications. So let's review from in here what we achieved in this segment. So we have now two activities. We have the main one, and then we have the one that we created separately from that we called there. Each of those has a layout. The one that was created for us, the main one, and then we created another one of our own under layout. There was a strings resource folder file created for us as part of the Hello World default application. We made a resource file for storing our colors, and this is very, very touchy for moving things from one folder to another by mistake. That's kind of deadly. Okay, we looked at a few more things in the Android manifest, and we remembered eventually to add our new activity to the manifest. Event handlers. This was the very first event handler, and we've cheated a little bit. We did the simple one, but that's okay. We'll look at more complicated event handlers eventually, probably when we're looking at more interesting user interface things that we can create with other kinds of widgets than a simple button. So we have an event handler which was created to execute when someone clicked on a button in the view. So the activity, which has a view associated with it, and in that view there was a button, and that button has a handler associated with it. Well, this is the summary slide. We've just pretty much done that summary discussion. We didn't play very much in the user interface builder, but that has to be its own topic. And what an intent can do, we haven't really explored very well. We made an intent that would go from one activity to the other, but intents are really kind of fundamental. So this is the next step. We're getting there. Try to be patient, because if you didn't get this to work, if you're fiddling with little XML tags and things like that, that's just how it goes. I've spent some time doing that myself.